Conversations with the Mind podcast, where we explore consciousness through conversations with interesting people. Our mission is to engage the collective mind piece by piece to bring greater clarity of mind to our listeners locally and across the planet, and to contribute to broaden the shared experiential knowledge and wisdom of existence.
Did you do that with him in?
No, we did it through Zoom.
Okay.
Yep. All right, folks, welcome back to Conversations with the Mind. I'm your host, as you know by now, Shane Lemaster. This is episode 86 with good friend Michelle Trumble. How are you?
I'm awesome.
Yeah.
Doing really good today. Yeah.
It's good to see you.
Yeah.
You know, I've been having a lot of, dreams come up lately about people from my past.
Mm-hmm.
Like entire cohorts of classmates from like 7th grade, 8th grade, even into high school, but they're playing totally different roles, or they're playing the same role. Like I've had a couple dreams where I'm like back at house parties that I remember us being at, you know, and sharing the same faces, but you know, we're all spirits that are doing different things, and it's been pretty crazy to kind of revisit some of that and revisit who I was back then. Mm-hmm. I was remembering, you know, you and I met, I think we met in middle school. Mm-hmm. And I had this weird memory, which I don't remember is real or not because I'm so far removed from it, so maybe you can confirm it or deny it. But, so were you on that trip with us to England and Scotland?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh my gosh.
So I thought so.
Forgot about that.
Like I don't have any pictures of it anymore, but I'm just trying to recall like who was involved with that, because I remember the trip very well. And I was like,
wild.
I think I remember Michelle being there.
Yeah, I was there. It's so funny because I was thinking about that trip the other day because I was talking about, actually just talking with my friends about kind of some of the spiritual connections that I have to my ancestors, and how when we got to Scotland, I was like, oh yeah, like I didn't even know then, like then it felt familiar and I didn't know why, and now I've been revisiting, you know, I've been trying to kind of look back at some of my roots because I know that I've got some ancestors that do the same work that I'm doing, and so it was wild because I was talking about that trip and I was like, there was a part of, I felt like I was at home once we got into the Scotland, Ireland place, but I don't remember a lot about the trip. Like like my memory is still, I struggle a lot with my memory. So same thing, I struggle with knowing what's real and what's not. After having I've had so many concussions and trauma and stuff, so it's hard for me to just be like, am I making that up? Or but
once you realize that your thoughts can lie to you, it's like you have to second guess every single one, even the ones you're like, I'm sure that happened, and someone else is like, no, that never happened.
But I need a picture to confirm it. Yeah, I've got pictures of Scotland or of our trip, but I don't have pictures of anybody in it. So
yeah. I too, you know, just reflecting back, I think I did feel a little bit of like a groundedness when I was in Scotland as well. Come to find out, my family's from Ireland, and like you know, went through that whole area. But what was more fascinating about what you just said was like having these spiritual ties to people. And I truly believe like throughout our entire life, you know, we meet so many people. I can remember people from elementary school still, and even like people back then when I haven't talked to them since, there still feels like there's some kind of connection there, right? Even if it's psychological or you know? Yeah,
totally. I have that.
Yeah. What do you think about that kind of, it's almost like tethering or quantum entanglement, you know?
Yeah, there's some kind of soul contract there. I think there's always something to learn from that. From my perspective anyways, with the work I've done, I definitely feel like there's been people that have stuck, and they have little, you know, like on the timeline, I can look back and see dots of where they popped up in my life here and in different ways. And it's like, well, there's some kind of soul contract there. Maybe there's some story there or some lesson there of something, and I don't know what that is. I don't have to figure it all out, but there's definitely something there, and I'm a big believer in, like I said, past lives. And so like, what did, you know, if there is a person that keeps popping up on my timeline, I'm just like, well, what is this entanglement that we have, or contract that we had in the past, in a past life or something like that. So yeah, I totally believe in that. I actually have also had dreams of random people recently that went to high school with, went to middle school with, and I was like, wow, what are these people showing up for, and what are they doing now? So I'm intrigued in what are they doing now? What kind of work are they doing now? To see, I wonder what the tie is, or.
So you're taking it beyond just like this lifetime. Like there's probably some meaning to be had there, like even within this microcosm, right, of this lifetime, but taking it to past lives and how that entanglement is. I think that's fascinating. It is weird how, you know, oftentimes these people pop up in our mind first, and then you know, it's like a call, almost like a call to action. Like, are you going to follow up with this and like reach out to this person who you haven't talked to like 15 years, or are you just gonna forget it again and just be like, oh, that was a nice memory? I think most of us are probably tackling that question all the time. Like, what do you? It sounds like you have delved into like exploring it more. So for you, that's been a healthy thing. Like for a lot of people, I think it would be scary.
Yeah, I mean, you know, going through some of the stuff that I've gone through, and then also working, you know, in different ceremonies to really get a big perspective of things. I don't think things scare me as much anymore. I'm just more curious of things, but what I really think about that connection piece is that we have this social media aspect where we can just, you know, for me, it's like, I wonder why this person's still coming up. Like for me, there's a belief that if somebody's coming up in a dream, or if there's something, maybe there's a message there, and I don't always look deep into it, but it intrigues me enough to just be like, I wonder what they're doing in their life these days. Like what kind of, like what is there a connection there? You know, like I know with us, we do a lot of the same work, helping people, and so there's probably something there too. And then there's a couple artist friends that I've had that have popped up, and then a couple people that have popped up, and I look down on their Facebook or social media, and I see that they're doing stuff with trauma survivors, and I'm like, oh, that's rad. So like I start to see the little connections, and sometimes I reach out if I have an idea of like, hey, we can work together, do something, and sometimes it's just like, hey, I was just thinking about you, because I've definitely reached out and said, hey, I had a dream about you. I don't know why I need to tell you this, but hey.
Does that ever turn out weird? When you're like, hey,
always,
I had a dream about you, and they're like, oh my god, what?
It probably goes to like, oh, that's kind of awkward. Why would you say that? And,
what kind of dream was that?
Yeah, exactly. What kind of dream did that happen? But you know, I'm such a transparent person, and I'm just curious, like, because I actually did reach out to somebody a couple years back because I had a dream, and I was like, and I hadn't talked to them in like 10 years. And I was like, I have to tell them there's something powerful about this dream. I reached out to them. They had the same exact dream. So it was pretty wild. So I've kind of like learned that there is something there. And I didn't really dive into it, but it ended up me being reintroduced to a different art form, a different type of art. And I rediscovered that I really like sculpture. And I was like, oh, so it really opened my mind up to remembering a part of me that I had forgotten, a part of me that was an artist when I was in high school. I used to sculpt all the time, and then trauma and stuff buried that away. And so I reached out to this person, they reintroduced me to sculpture, and I was like, oh shit. So, you know, I really feel like there's
that sounds like a pathway that you opened, and they were the door that you had to walk through to get back to that. That's
some
pretty
weird
cool.
dream. But yeah, I do believe that there's some reason something pops in, for sure. We don't have to figure it out, but
no, but that's really interesting. These soul tetherings. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, but you're right.
Going way down.
Yeah, you're right. We don't have to solve that. But I think it's real. You know, I think we need to pay attention to that kind of stuff. But yeah, the reason why I brought that up is because I had these dreams. You were in a couple of them, and then I had these memories of England, and I'm like, did that happen? I have to reach out to this person. But what I found interesting about social media, especially for old fogies like us,
I'm young.
Well, yeah, me too. But apparently, the youngsters think that Facebook is for old people and don't really join it. So that's I don't know.
I didn't hear that one yet.
Yeah, I guess I'm most active on that. But what's been really interesting is that a lot of my reconnections with others from my past have been through psychedelics, right? So it's been something I've been engaged in since high school, and probably a lot of people remember me that way. But now, other people are discovering it for themselves, or, getting into the research themselves, or, you know, practicing breath work and having psychedelic experiences and getting interested, and then they're sharing on social media, and then I'm like, oh, yeah, welcome, let's connect. Do you find that too?
Oh yeah, I love it. I get messages every now and then. I'm like, nice. I finally know what you're talking about. Actually, last week I had shut my social media off for a little while because it was getting a little noisy, and I shut it off, and that's when I missed a bunch of messages, and I had gotten a message from an old high school friend. Actually, you probably know him, but he messaged me, and he was like, man, all those years that you were trying to get me to go to breathwork, I finally did one online, and he was like, I let go of all this, and I moved through this, and I'm finally feeling happy, and I was like, yes. I get so happy, because it's so fun when you get people that come to you after you've been trying to convince them for so long of like, I promise you this could be a next step or something like that. And so it's just fun for them to come and just be like, hey, what you said was real. But you can't convince anybody to experience anything if they're not ready for it.
Right.
But
it has to be their idea too.
Yeah, and I can't explain the experience because you got to do it. So but it's way cool to get those messages of like, hey, I get it now.
Yeah, so I mean, what have you been? I don't want to know the Facebook version of Michelle right now, but what have you been up to lately? Like, looks like from your photos and stuff, you've been going to like this. I saw this women's retreat.
Oh yeah, that
looked awesome.
Yeah.
And obviously, I can't go to those.
Yeah,
but
definitely
from women who I know who take part in those, like they love the bonding that happens there. And
totally.
Can you talk a little bit about that, or is it all secretive?
No.
Like a secret society?
There's definitely some things that we like to kind of keep sacred. Of course, that. There's some things that it's just, what happens in the woods stays in the woods, and but yeah, there's something that really happens when you can get. It's hard because I want to be politically correct, but people of the same gender identity, or the same, I don't want to say it wrong, but when you get a group of women together and get them in the woods, and so I've been a part of this. I was a part of it last year. We're gonna do it again in September again and drive out there, but a good friend of mine, Laura Wolf, she did some work with my other friend Melanie Lighthouser, and they did some breathwork training, and it's kind of evolved. So my friend Laura Wolf did this retreat called Wild Woman, and so it's about getting women into the woods and just stripping away all of the societal bullshit, like basically
getting wild.
Literally like stripping us down into our just feminine wild women selves, and re-inspiring us, and removing all the insecurities that come from society, all the insecurities and all the stories and ideas that we have been fed, and so it's just
how do you do that?
So the way that we work through it is through shamanic practices. So working with the elements. So what's really powerful about it is that weekend that you probably saw, it was we work through the elements. So we do a lot of practices that have to do with earth, air, fire, water. So we get there and we do earth practices. So that's just really grounding down into the earth. And then there's specific ceremonies that we will do to really get us grounded down, to really remember our roots, remember where we came from, without all of the noise and everything. And it's beautiful because we go into this private area in the woods where nobody bothers us, and it's just us. So it's just beautiful. And it's just stripping everybody down into their bare souls, so that, we create containers so that women feel comfortable to be able to just be completely transparent in whatever it is. But there's a bonding that happens when you spend that much time with a group in the woods without cell phones, without everything, and we clean up our diet so we feel connected to the earth. We do a lot of plant-based food, so we're really connected to the plants, to the earth, and to the elements, and that's a lot of that's just a lot of using shamanic practices. So we'll do water ceremonies and play in the river, and fire ceremonies with drums and just dancing. There's so, it's so hard to explain.
How long is it?
That one is 3 days long.
3 days.
And before all this COVID stuff happened, I actually scheduled one and planned one in Hawaii.
Wow. That would have been nice.
Oh my god,
Is it
I
on,
had
like,
so many
private
details.
land, or?
Yeah, so I found a retreat center in Hawaii, and it's a place that they weren't quite doing. They were doing retreats, but it was really quiet. You can't find it on websites. But I have a friend that lives in Hawaii that was just going around the island. She's like, I found this quiet spot, and it's on top of one of the hills, and so I had it planned out. So one of the ceremonies was going to be under the full moon, and in Hawaii you don't have any light pollution, so the stars, you feel like you can touch them. The moon is just in your face, and so yeah, I hope after all of this I can get back to scheduling these retreats, because there's something so special about doing deep immersions with a group of people. You can develop really deep connections with these people because they don't have the rest of the world clouding everything. The ego's kind of like left on the plane and everything's back there. So you really get these raw humans, and there's a different kind of connection. I've obviously done a lot of growth with different groups over a span of time where we meet every few weeks, but there's something different about doing these deep immersions where we're doing work every day with each other and being out in nature.
And you've told me about more, deep immersion, even over 3-day weekends for medicine work too. And, that's still something that I haven't done for myself is like an immersive one with multiple nights of ceremony. And it's something I want to do, but my life is just not structured in a way to do it at this point. So, I hear about, the added benefit of, it's almost like stacking.
It is. It adds on top of each other. There are so many layers. And then when you're doing it with groups, it's almost as if some of their experiences start to kind of intertwingle.
I love that word.
That's a word I came up with a long time ago. I forgot that it's
intertwingle.
It's not a word, but it is. Intertwingle. But yeah, there's something about spending that much time with people, really getting to know them, and especially on those weekends, we play music with each other, with music with the medicine. But yeah, there's something so profound about the immersion, because it allows you to go to places that I don't think you can go if you're only spending one night with somebody. Or, like in my breathwork training, it was a 9-month program, and it was one weekend a month, but there was still space in between to go back into real life. There was still space back in to go back into all the noise. And these immersions, when you're especially cut off from the outside world, there's no room to add in all the extra noise. It's as if it's you and these people in this circle are the only people on the planet.
You're in your own little spaceship.
Yeah.
So then, if you guys are cut off from like all tech and everything, how did you guys get pictures that you could share?
So we'll get out. For the most part, the phones are put away, but there's usually a photographer there that also joins in the activities, and it's just her craft.
Documents.
To bring it, so she'll bring
awesome.
her professional camera out, and getting permission from everybody, and so and that's a powerful thing, because as we were talking about before, some of us that have had several concussions or have struggle remembering things, to just have some form of a way of remembering a picture will bring it all back, so it's pretty, and I think that that's the same thing. Every time I've scheduled a retreat or been a part of a retreat, you always make sure to have a photographer there just to kind of capture some of these moments, because some of these moments were so, we did a water ceremony where it's not a religious experience, but it's kind of almost like a baptism, where we're rebirthing these women back into the world after they've gone through all these experiences. And so just being able to capture some of those moments, it's just a picture that'll last a lifetime, and they can go back and remember that's the time we howl at the moon, and that's the time that I like inspired myself. So yeah, but everything else is cut off.
Yeah, it sounds like the moon is an important part of this, especially with the howling piece. But from what I've heard, in Hawaii anyway, on the full moons, it's actually pretty difficult to see the full starscape still, because the moon's so bright.
Yeah.
You can see fairly well outside. So, it's what is it, the new moon, where there's no moon? On those nights, if it's clear, then you can see the entire Milky Way.
Yeah.
So I guess it depends on like what kind of experience you want to have, and different people associate different things with the moon and with the cosmos too. Like for me, the cosmos means like, oh shit, we're going deep today. With the moon connection, it's more like it's more a localized connection. It feels more reliable. It feels safer than going deep cosmic.
Yeah, you're more connected and a little bit more grounded when
Yes.
you have the planets, like physically, you know, there is a
Yeah.
deeper human connection than it, you know, the cosmos is
Yeah.
souls, a lifetime.
What do you know about philosophy and theology around moon practices?
I mean, that's a lot of what we learn in our what I've learned in shamanic practices is that there's so many cycles of the moon, and especially as women, you know, our cycles follow the cycle of the moon. You know, before we got inundated with all these hormones in our food and all that stuff, but you know, there's so many energies that change with the moon, and I, you know, there's different ceremonies that I've done with the moon, and so. You can go, I mean, I can go down several different rabbit holes with that, but it's really just this symbol of like a next step. Like the moon helps us to just shed some layers, let go, or it's just a symbol that can really help people just reconnect or come back to center and figure something else out. You know, the new moon represents a little something different than the full moon, and in a lot of different traditions it's different for everybody, so it's kind of individualistic for each person.
And that's what I've found kind of confusing about it is how different it is between cultures. What you're describing is mostly what I've read on it, that like newer moons are for cultivating things in your life, full moon is for like big releases, letting go, and then the what is it, the waxing?
The waxing and the waning,
waning is waning after full, or
yes.
Okay, so during the waning mood, that's still like shedding those old habits, old layers, and it's cyclical like that too.
Yeah. It's like a guide, you know. Some people just want a guide to continue moving forward, and so it's nice to do that. But yeah, it's really powerful to be able to create a ceremony from it, and however you want to do it. If you're just doing a ceremony to let go or bring in something, it's whatever that's personal to you.
It's engaging that connection. You know,
just a reminder.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. Do you know of any other philosophies around moon practices? I mean, I know they differ between cultures, but I don't know many other philosophies around them.
I don't think I haven't dove super deep into just moon practices. I definitely do different ceremonies with them, but what I've done is I've kind of pulled pieces from different lineages or different books that I've read. So I can't say that I know anything one specific way. What I do is I bring in things that work best for me. So I can't say that I know any specific philosophies or anything like that, and I don't want to quote anything because I just take what works for me personally.
Sure. When I get into the moon stuff, it's often entangled with talks around like equinoxes too, which I know nothing about. But I know Alex and Allison Gray hold like mini festivals or gatherings during the equinoxes for healing, and you know a lot of traditions use the equinoxes as like, I don't know, big moments of change possibly.
I don't know. I don't have a lot of philosophy around that either. I know that, you know, I'll join in with my friends that know a little bit more about that. And you can feel a shift, but I believe in the planetary energies, but I also believe that, you know, our minds can create that if we really fully indulge or set these deep intentions at these certain times. If we fully believe in that, then it's going to happen because we're just using our mind to do
manifestation.
it. So, yeah. So, you know.
Yeah, I know. You know, I guess that's why a lot of people don't like astrology. You know, don't see its scientific merit, and I didn't used to either. But I had a reading done by an ex-girlfriend's mom who was straight from Italy, and she was like this older psychic, like for real.
Yeah.
And took my exact birth time and location.
Your birth chart, all
right,
of
my
that,
birth chart, and She printed it out, and then she explained the whole thing to me. It took like 6 hours for her to do this.
Oh yeah, with all the houses and I don't understand
all that
any
stuff.
of it, but yeah.
But it was so predictive, and even today, things that she told me still manifest in certain ways in my life. And part of me thinks, well, she told me this, therefore I chose to believe it,
Right.
and then I manifested
Right.
it. And part of me is like, well, there's got to be some kind of there's got to be something there as far as astrology and planetary alignments and zodiac signs and all that stuff. You know, even like some of the more mundane descriptions of my zodiac sign, like Scorpio, like
Right.
will fit me to a T.
Yeah.
Or it's, you know, it lines right up with, yeah, these are my struggles in life for sure. And so they become good structure for me to like base journey work on and base healing on. So it's like a roadmap for me.
Yeah, it's a nice guide.
Yeah, I identify with
it. Yeah, yeah.
And then I'm like, yeah, I need to work on that.
Yeah.
And so I've transitioned a lot of I've like turned off the switches on a lot of my Scorpio nature. It's still there. But
the one's not serving you.
Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, even when I meet new people and they ask me my sign, they're not always right on with guessing Scorpio anymore. So they're guessing me as different, like mostly Leo.
Yeah, see, I'm a Leo, so
yeah. They're guessing me more that because I think I've been able to turn off some of those Scorpio
I can feel that. Yeah, I'm a Leo, and so I'm definitely in your face. Here I am. I've got a lot of ego for sure. But I've learned to shut the ego off. I've learned, because Leo is a fire sign, so it's just like out there, wild. And I've had to definitely learn to check the ego a lot, turn that switch off for sure. So I do appreciate. I don't understand astrology, but I've got a lot of friends that are deep into it, and so it's fascinating where they'll be able to point things out, and I'm, you know, and first I'll be in denial. I'm like, I don't believe in all the planet stuff, but it's definitely shifted my way of understanding, and I could see where, I had somebody read my birth chart too, and it was wild for them to see, you know, when I was 7 this happened, and when I was 12 this happened, and I was like, wow. You know, and it all had to do with just how the planets aligned, and so I fully believe in it. I've never wanted to study that. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine. It was just my interests have always been earth-based. I'm such a grounded person, and so I've got friends that live in the cosmos and on the planets and talk about all the planetary Pleiadians and all of that kind of stuff. And me,
what's
I'm
the
just
Pleiadians?
like, oh man, you can go down a whole rabbit hole with that. It's wild. It's so wild. Yeah, look up Pleiadians. I'll have to write it down.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down too.
Plae something Pleiadians. It's fascinating. It's not something that I have time to really dive into, but you know, I've always appreciated it, and I trust it and believe in it, but my roots and the stuff that I'm deeply interested in is more earth-based, you know, connecting with, you know, we have so many plants around that can teach us so many different things, like not just the psychedelics, but just so many different herbs, and you know, I am just such a grounded person, but it's nice to know that because I can be really flighty.
No, I feel that from you too. You know, you give off like this Mother Earth vibe, you know, which, you know, knowing you back in the day, like, you didn't give me that vibe back then. Like, you really came into what I feel was like your more truer self, you know, like, when I picture your 7th grade self and the people you were hanging out with, I was like, that's not who she was.
Yeah, I don't even know who I was. Yeah. I mean, I think I was always more a little bit, you know, I definitely growing up with my, you know, my parents took us camping all the time. So I'm definitely, you know, and being in Colorado, I've always been this earth lover, but not to the level I'm at now. Not, you know, with learning more and more about the shamanic path is learning how in tune with nature that we can be if we just let go a little bit and stop trying to fix it. But, you know, with the way our world is, you have to adapt a little bit. So I go between this fight of we need to get back to our indigenous roots and figure out how to grow the plants that were indigenous here and do that. But we also have to, you know, move with technology and adapt to all the evolution happening. Yeah. And that's good.
I want to pick your brain a little bit more with that here in a sec, but I think and thank you for sharing, you know, where you feel yourself like really grounded on Earth. Just, we're in this transpersonal process right now, right? Sharing this space, sharing this conversation. I'm teaching you things, you're teaching me things, you're teaching me things about myself just through the conversation, and I love that piece, number one. But you just sharing that about where you sit made me reflect on kind of where I am too. And this has been a question that has gone unanswered for a long time for me. And because I certainly don't feel 100% grounded here. I used to, when I was younger, feel really grounded. But now I feel more and more, kind of out there in the cosmos. Like my head is up in the clouds most of the time, but thinking about, really complex and deep philosophical questions. Right. So for me, I'm kind of like this in between right now, where I still am grounded to some extent, but I'm kind of one foot out the door, like I'm ready, or I'm wanting to go travel. And who knows, maybe not come back to the earth. I think the earth has so much, like you said, to offer and to teach, and so much wisdom, and that's amazing. I'm in awe of that. But and
up here,
I'm like, let's go look at the pretty colors. Right. So, thank you for sharing that, because that allowed me to kind of reflect on that and figure out for myself, like, well, where am I, and am I okay with that? And I am. I'm okay with that. I feel like that's where I'm at on the cosmic wheel of life.
Well, and I think that's what's so wild about like plant medicine, especially like if you're in a ceremony or on a journey, you're deep on the medicine, you can simultaneously like appreciate this grounded earth, like, even paying attention to the blades of grass on this minute level, but also just be like, whoa, what's out here in the cosmos, so far out there. I think there's this like beautiful connection that's there, that you can be in both those worlds. You can be up in your, if we look at it, the chakras, like the root chakra is more earth-based, the crown chakra is more in the cosmos, that kind of thing. And I think that we can have it both, but it's so wild, especially with what's going on, everything going on now. We're going through this big phase of evolution, and so it's easy for us to just be like, where am I on that spectrum? Especially a lot of us that have been practicing a lot of like deep-rooted earth-based practices. It's just, witnessing like, okay, but we have to evolve. So how do we incorporate indigenous wisdom and deep-rooted wisdom in this adapting to this new, we're moving into a new dimension.
Right.
I mean, that's how I see it. And so how do we adapt that? We have to incorporate both. Yeah.
So that was, let's get back into that piece a little bit. So, you walk in both worlds, I want to hear about how you do that. None of us have like the for sure answer yet. We're still working through it individually and as a society, but I'd be interested to hear, like, what are you coming up with in your mind as far as like how we integrate indigenous knowledge and tradition while also not culturally appropriating, while paying due respect. How do we do that and merge it with modern culture, technology, unfortunately, capitalism, because it's here. We have to have a plan, or we have to have a vision for what we want before we can start taking any steps to create that. And that's where I think we're at right now, where it's like everybody wants change, and we're like, this is it. Like the momentum is big enough, evolution is coming, but no one's saying this is. They're not laying out. This is the checklist we got to do. And no one's stepping up as a leader, who oversees all these things that are happening, because there's so many different things happening.
I think
you need to have leaders that stand up, and all the leaders of these movements are still behind closed doors. So for you, like when you look around and you still do your practices, like how do you walk that line between ethical indigenous integration and modern living?
Oh man, I'm still learning that. I mean, that's gonna be a learning thing for the next several lifetimes, probably. And this is just stuff that I've witnessed in some of my own teachers, is that you can't go out and propose change if you're not doing it in your home, and that's
Mm-hmm.
we're asking so much of everybody to change, and I think that there's so much talk about we need change, but what are you doing at home to really learn and listen? And I think that that's where I've been going quiet. I wanted to kind of shut off the social media for a second before I adapt into like, how do we shift that? Is like, I need to really get grounded into my practices and grounded into what I want, the change that I want to see, or, you just showed me your garden. It's like, that's something that I think that we can all start doing, is we could all start growing our own food. And I think that is just something that could be a big change. I really do believe that we don't have to rely on capitalism for our food. We can't. And so those are just simple changes. And I'm seeing it's been beautiful during this whole COVID shutdown, to witness everybody kind of get back to that, as like they can rely on their own ability to grow their own food or make their own things. People are getting really creative with that. And I think that's part of the adaptability and evolution, is watching everybody get really creative when we don't have the resources that we thought we had. And so I don't know, I'm still learning all of that. But one of the biggest things I think is just like getting back into my practices that keep me grounded so that I can handle all the evolutionary changes. It's inevitable. And so it's shifting my belief around, okay, I can't stop what's happening, me personally. Right. But there's different steps that I can make to shift my perception around what's changing and shift my expectations. And so I think it kind of just starts. That's such a.
Well, it starts with yourself.
It definitely starts with yourself. And I think what I'm noticing is everybody is so, and even me too, getting lost in it, is like we want to correct other people, and everybody wants to be right, and everybody wants to tell other people, well, this is what you need to shift, and this is what you need to shift, and all it ends up creating is conflict and dissonance, and like that's all I'm witnessing, and so I really think with the evolution and change is that we need to get people back together, and I know that that's really difficult right now. That's so hard right now, but there's something to be said about technology being super beneficial, but how do we get the beating heart into technology? How do we get the eyes in it? How do we get this connection where we can look at each other in the eyes? Because there's not a lot of dissonance when you can sit across from somebody and witness their beating heart, and their looking into their eyes, you can have these better conversations. And I think that's what we're missing right now, is we're not able to really utilize, well, and maybe we are, maybe I've just been so disconnected, maybe people are doing this more often, but being able to have heart-to-heart conversations so that we can create change, because like you said, everybody's kind of in hiding, like me, it was just like there was so much noise, and it was kind of distracting having all this technology, that I shut it down, because I was like, if I'm going to make a change anywhere, I can't have all this noise, I got to get quiet. And I feel like more powerful when I do that. I can get more powerful when I shut off all the noise of not scrolling through Facebook, not seeing what everybody's doing or fighting about or anything like that, and I actually grow in my inner power so that I can go out and make a change. But I can't, so we got to get people back to taking care of themselves mentally, physically, emotionally, so that they go out there with their heart first. Because these people that are filled with so much anger and hate and just like constant conflict, it's because they're continuing to disengage from their own inner work. And so
I'm going to throw in there spirituality too.
Yeah, spiritual, yeah.
Even if
the spiritual aspect is huge. Yeah.
Some people listening will probably disagree, but for me anyway, that spiritual connection, if maintained, then the rest of them are easy to maintain.
Exactly.
It just comes. Yeah.
Well, because that's what helps with your purpose. Yeah. That's what It's just like, what's your purpose? Who are you? What are you here for?
I think I've been asking myself that a lot lately. Yeah. And I keep getting validated that what I'm doing right now is what I'm supposed to be here for. Yeah. It feels great, but I can also remember times when I asked that question and had no idea. Or I definitely knew that I was on a path that was not what I was supposed to be doing. And I think a lot of people out there are on, in that space right now, with all these things going on, right? I love the way you describe it. It's a new dimension. It literally is a new dimension of time and space that we're in right now. It's a different timeline than if this stuff had never happened.
Yeah, we're in the birth canal. We're like, what's
right.
going on?
Yeah, and so it brings me back to your first point, which I think is an amazing point. Moving forward, how do we evolve? People need to go back to basic skills and learning how to be more adaptable, how to be more resilient in their own space, right?
Yep.
Going home and, we need to relearn how to hunt. We need to relearn how to farm for ourselves on small farms or in community farms, not large. We got out of control with the factories.
Oh yeah, that was
so
downfall.
we need to go back to some of these things. I have people I know that don't even know how to. They didn't know how to cook more than 5 meals for themselves once COVID hit, and I'm on these Zoom calls and they're like, oh yeah, I just learned how to cook like this meal. It's my number 2 meal, and I'm like, geez, guys, like you don't know how to cook you rely so much on like fast food and eating out and all these things, but those conveniences can stop at any time. We can see that. So this point about adaptability to this new dimension reminded me of this theory that I'm working on personally around motion sickness. And I have no evidence to back this up except for personal experience. And I'm just like asking people who get motion sickness about their experience. But I have this idea that motion sickness simply just comes on in the body when the body or the sensory perception of the consciousness has trouble adapting to whatever's going on in the environment, right?
Yeah.
So people get sick on boats, they get sick in cars, they get sick on planes. And part of that is them looking around and having this anxiety of like, oh, like I'm kind of out of control. My body's moving back and forth. I don't have control over my equilibrium right now.
Yeah.
And trouble adapting to that, resisting that
not
change
being
rather
able
than
to
just like
surrender
relaxing.
to it.
Causes like this inner like motion sickness, right?
Yeah.
So I got thinking about this theory with this adaptability to new times, right?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if not being able to adapt to this current change in dimension can cause other forms of sickness or help harbor coronavirus.
I believe that fully. I fully believe that.
Sorry, folks, if you hear construction, they are like right outside my window fixing our street. So we're going to try and talk over that. So I apologize.
No, that makes so much sense. And it that makes so much sense on a lot of different levels, I feel like. And it's it actually came to me in an ayahuasca journey one time when it was just when the DMT hits and it's just when you're really in it.
I call that the Tryptamine Palace.
Yeah, and it's just wild, and sometimes it's just like, this is too much for my brain, this is too much for my body to handle, and it'll last longer the more you try to fight it, right? And it'll make you feel dizzy, it'll make you feel like you don't know where the ground is, where you don't know where sky is, you don't know where you are in space, until grandmother's like, surrender, like just let go, and there was an evening where I was so resistant. The medicine was trying to get me to surrender and let go so much and just be. And I was fighting it. And then finally I was just like, I'm just going to melt into it. I'll just dissolve then. I'll just dissolve into whatever vibration is going on around here. And that's actually exactly what's helped me kind of adapt to all this stuff. It's like, well, we can't fight all this stuff that's changing. And we're not, all these people that talk about like, well, we need to go back to the way things used to be. And I think that's where a lot of us are struggling in society, is that everybody wants everything to go back to the way it was, and it's never going to. There is no...
Hopefully it doesn't.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I really like it. But I think it's because I can almost see a bigger picture and look out, and I'm happy to reminisce, but I'm ready to evolve and move on. And I think that's the thing, is we have these expectations, and if we can just drop the expectations and surrender to whatever dimension is vibrating us out.
So what do you mean, like expectations? Like expectations around what's going to happen with like Black Lives Matter, or expectations around what's going to happen with COVID, or
everything. Everybody expects everything to go back to not everybody, but I hear it a lot, actually. There's some people I hang out with and work with that constantly say like, well, when things go back to normal, and
I've said it a few times.
And it's this spell. They're casting a spell on their brain of like, well, if things don't go back to normal, I'm not going to accept any of this. And so they're blocking themselves from being able to just surrender to today.
Right.
You know, here we are today, just get through it, instead of, you know, you're trying to live so far in the past, you're trying to live in yesterday, and that's gone. And if we can accept that and we can grieve it, I know we're all going through a big grieving process, some of us. I'm actually excited about the shifts that are happening. But yeah, I think it's shaken up, and I think, you know, it brings me, like you were talking about, like motion sickness. There's so many veils being moved right now. There's so many illusions that we thought that we trusted in these people, or, you know, people didn't realize how much racism was still going on. People don't realize how much, you know, the pedophile rings that are happening that are just huge underground. People had all these blinders up and all these veils up, and I think what's dizzying to a lot of people right now is all the veils are being pulled back, and they're being overwhelmed with all this stuff. And I think some of us that kind of knew that some of this stuff was happening aren't getting as motion sick.
Yeah, we're a little more resilient, maybe because we like pre-educated ourselves as best we could anyway, or we just, at least we entertained the idea that other things were going on, and then lo and behold, other things are going on. So so we maintained almost like a flexibility in our reality.
Well, and trauma happens. You know, like I think because I've had trauma happen to me, I'm not, and I've gone through a lot with my drug addictions and my just all the different trauma, that now I'm not as shocked when I hear things happening. I'm just like, oh yeah, you should have seen things that I saw when I was growing up. You know, I saw a lot of things, so I'm not, for me personally, I'm not as shocked when we hear about all these things. So I'm just like, yes, this is going on. And
I know, and I feel the same way, and I also get this sense too that if I share that openly with other people, like, yeah, I'm not shocked. They're like, they would hold it against me almost, like, how are you not shocked that this tragedy just happened, and you know, this, you know, whatever happened? And I'm just like, yeah,
I empathize. Yeah, I think I empathize with it, but it doesn't shock me that there's this much hate. You know, everybody's like, I can't believe there's this much hate still in this, and it's like, that doesn't really shock me, and it has nothing to do with me not feeling for the violence and all that stuff going on, but I'm not as attached to the emotions of it, because I know that I can't help if I am investing in the pain with them. If I'm going down into feeling the anger with them, I'm not going to be as of service, because I'm not fully capable of doing my work in the vibration of anger. I'm not powerful in my anger. I mean, I can be, for sure. But I'm not productive in my anger.
Yeah. So I think, like you said, like, we need to cultivate within ourselves first, like, adaptability, resilience, flexibility, and this means in body, mind, spirit, all those areas, working on ourselves. And I love how you said keeping it at home too, and home always starts with yourself, right? But another thing that I think has been a huge positive from the COVID especially is people are forced to go back home, and if they have families, like, this is an opportunity to reconnect if they choose to do it. Unfortunately, I also work with social workers, and so I hear a lot of negative stories too about domestic violence going up, suicide going up, child abuse going up, all these things happening too. And we definitely need to address that too. But like coming home and focusing, and maybe someone out there is experiencing that right now, and that's where the healing needs to happen, is in the home, right? The healing doesn't need to happen right now for them on the level of government or politics,
right? Because that can overwhelm. That big picture can overwhelm so many people if they try to look at the bigger picture. Yeah.
So bringing it back home and just focusing on family. So what have you done that you've been happy or proud about, or that brings a smile to your face with your family at home? You have kids, and something that I'm really looking forward to very soon. So I love to ask guests who come on and have kids, just like, what is that like? And what has it been like, you know, when schools shut down and daycare shut down, and how have you adapted to that, and how have you struggled with that?
Oh man, yeah, I've definitely felt the spectrum of it, struggle and pure joy. It's been wild. So Frankie just turned 4 2 days ago.
Happy birthday, Frankie.
Yeah. That's so wild to think that I have a 4-year-old. But yeah, that's been so interesting because at her age, it's really hard to explain to her what's going on in the world because she really doesn't, she doesn't go out enough. She doesn't have a lot of big social interaction. She does have preschool, and the preschool that she goes to, actually, the owner of it, is, I vibe with her. I vibe with her with the way they teach, the way they're called Arts and Imagination. It's awesome there. They're so great with the kids there, but there hasn't been a lot of big change with her. So Frankie doesn't know a lot of what's going on. There's been times where we haven't been able to go to the park, and so I've had to just kind of tell her that there's people that are sick, and so we're just trying to be safe. But for the most part, with my family, we're mountain people, so we go up to the mountains, we run away to the mountains, we do a lot of nature stuff, we go for walks, and so I can't say that she knows exactly a lot of what's going on. She rarely ever went to stores with me anyways, so I don't know, so she hasn't gone to the store and seen the masks. So she doesn't have, and maybe she does and she doesn't tell me, but her reality hasn't changed a whole lot other than me and her dad, me and my partner are home. We were home a lot more. He's back to work now, but we were both working from home. So I would say that was the biggest struggle, was we were both working from home, and I see clients on my laptop. He's working on his laptop. When you have a 3-year-old running around needing to be entertained, that was frustrating. And so that was forcing me to get back into my practices even more because I was getting very, very short-tempered with her. And so it had me really realize, what was more important. So I changed a lot of things I realized that I can slow down way more than I thought and be present with her. I was really forced to just tell clients.
Do you just pause for a second?
Yeah, and they adapted. There was a couple times where I teach yoga, so I had to teach from home. And so, there was a couple times during deep meditations where people were relaxing in meditation, Frankie would come running down the steps and say, "Come wipe my butt, I just pooped." And I'm just like,
it's part of the meditation, people.
Yeah, and I think that's a good, it was a good lesson for them to learn that, distractions are going to come in life and you can stay centered in that. And so it's just been fun to see, there's been a lot of struggle of being at home. I'm a social body for sure. And so there was a lot of struggle with having to relearn how to be basically on top of each other at our house. That I'm not used to that. I'm used to having the house to myself. My partner's used to traveling a lot. And so just relearning what the family unit really is. And my daughter spending so much time at home, realizing how she is during this COVID time compared to how she was when we were working. Her mood changed a lot because we were home, grounded, centered, eating better foods because I was cooking more.
More attention.
Yeah, and she was coming home and seeing me do my yoga practices. She was witnessing me in my practices, out watering the garden. And so now she's doing laundry. So it was really cool to just witness, the shift in my busy life compared to we're shutting it down and adapting. And so, so she's learning how to do all the practices. So it was really cool because I didn't do it on purpose, but I was teaching her.
Yeah. No, that's amazing.
Yeah, so it was really cool. But yeah, it gets frustrating. A 4-year-old is a lot to handle, especially because she's sassier than me.
Yeah, as I look forward to having kids, I'll probably be steeped right in my dissertation at the time that I have an infant. And so I've been doing all this simulating and projecting in my head, and it's so much fun. I feel like, and I think I said this on the podcast before, I definitely told my wife, but I feel like I'm already tethered spiritually with whatever baby is destined to come into my life, and we're, we want, we joke around, but I think we really want twins or triplets on the first try and just be done.
Be careful.
But I'm going to be a stay-at-home dad. That's something that we both want for our kids, and so I'm imagining how am I going to do this doctoral dissertation while I'm holding this baby all day long. And I think you're right. What you said, I think, is going to is going to resonate with me is slowing down and provide that attention that the infant or the baby or the child wants in the moment. It will pass, and then I can get back to the work. So
it's doable.
Yeah, so the work will be dictated by when the baby sleeps and things like that. So I think as long
there won't be a lot of sleep.
Yeah, as long as I can adapt, we'll see how it goes. But
it'll be fun.
I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
It sounds like in your home space, it was almost like a shock to the system at first. Everybody's all there all at once.
Yeah, it was like we hit a brick wall and had to just be home. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, and then everybody gets a little bit raw for a little bit. Like at the beginning, it was just me and my wife and my 2 dogs here. But I would reach times in the day where I'm like, I need to go lock myself in the bedroom for I'm going to be in there for an hour. Just to give myself my own space. Now, she's back to working out in the community. I still work from home, which I love. But, we have a little more leeway, a little more space. So I think, as this thing unfolds a little bit more and people try and adapt their work lives, their daycare lives, all these things back to this new reality, and I think we'll adapt,
Totally.
We'll be able to figure out how can we stay safe and go to work and keep the economy running and
it'll happen. I have full I mean, Frankie's already back in school, so we're
in-person school.
Yeah, she's already back in school, and so there's precautions and everything's going. I mean, so far, it's not back to normal, but it's a new shift, and I think that that's what's going to make us stronger and more resilient. Is just being like, okay, this is what we're going to do today. But I think that that's what's necessary, is to just accept, and not accept everything. I know there's different things that we need to fight to change for sure, but accepting that we can't just change it all in one day. But it's so great, like having, what I realized is that so my partner and I have been together for 12 years, I think. I don't know. We've never had a for sure date. It's just kind of, we never got married. It was just, we've just been each other's person for 12 years. And so it was interesting because the first probably 5 years we were just with each other, doing everything all the time with each other, and I loved it. And now I'm so glad that we're not like that. I'm so grateful that we both have our own individual interests and hobbies and things. And so when all this stuff happened, I was like, oh man, I really miss my individuality, because I make it a purpose as a mom. I'm a great caregiver, but I make it a purpose as a mom to have me time a lot. I schedule, I go off on
What's a lot? Like every day, or do you save it up?
Every day,
bank on it every couple of weeks, or how do you do it?
I mean, I definitely schedule vacations, camping trips where it's just mom. Okay. Where, and the great thing about me and my partner is that that's something that we really appreciate. I will even help him schedule plans where he can go away with his guys, because I think it's so important to do that, especially when you're taking care of a family unit, and now that you're in charge of this other human being, it's just wild, because now this whole other life is in your hands. So it's just, if you're so enveloped in that, I see people just get lost in that, lost in parenting, where
what does that look like? Someone gets lost in they lose their own interest.
They lose their identity,
and
they just become mom or just become dad, and I've seen that, and I've definitely witnessed that in friends and clients where they're giving their all constantly. These moms that think that they have to be the one to cook dinner every single night, they have to be the one to run all the errands, or they have to continually just drain their energy, and not making it sound so bad, not drain their energy, but when you're not scheduling time for yourself to fill back up, if you're not actually putting that on the schedule to just be like, I'm out, I'm going to go to the mountains and replenish. If you're not doing that, you're going to be stressed and drained all the time, because they're these loving little beings that you're taking care of, but when it's just them all the time, you start to lose your own spiritual connection. You start to lose your own physical, mental connection. Your emotions don't matter because you're worrying about how your emotions are affecting, your child. So you shut things down in order to be this teacher caregiver for them. And so I think it's so important for us to be able to schedule time to just go lose our shit, or go reconnect, or go do something.
Well, what you just said, shutting pieces of yourself down, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm really good at that. Like already, it's like I've developed that skill through traumas my whole life.
Yeah.
And you know, in the last couple of years, I've been making progress, but almost feeling like at an impasse at some level.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly believe like it's my future children that are going to break me out of this mold.
Oh yeah.
And it's going to make me really embrace like that silliness, that playfulness, the imagination, the creativity, all those things that when I shut down negative emotions I didn't want to feel also got shut down as a consequence.
Yep.
I didn't mean to shut them down, but you know, when you go into shutdown mode, it shuts everything down.
Right.
And so I'm really hoping that, you know, the children will bring it out of me.
Oh man, it's wild. You'll get so silly. You'll find yourself saying things that you never thought you did, and
or watching the most ridiculous cartoon shows all the time, and knowing the theme songs. I watch my brother knowing the
stupid
songs.
Shark song. I don't even want to sing it.
And the Frozen song and all that stuff.
Yeah, but yeah, it gets you so silly, and yeah, it'll make you a big pile of silly mush.
Good.
It's fun.
That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place for us to take a quick break. So stick around for the next segment with Michelle.
Oh.
All right, folks, we're back for segment number 2, and as you can hear, my co-host Ty is barking again, and as he always does. So he's barking at the mailman currently, and this is just a show full of sound effects.
Beep, boop, boop.
We got the construction. We got my dog. He'll stop in a second. Let me see. Oh, I see. There's a couple dogs outside, so this will pass. But we were talking on the break about some. Ooh, Tank chimed in. He rarely does. You hear him?
Uh-huh.
That's quite the conversation they're having. I don't think I've ever gotten both of them on the recording at once. That's pretty cool.
Needed some backup.
Yeah. Huh. Anyway, so on the break we were talking about ketamine, and that's you asked me what I'm going to do my dissertation on, and it's around the mystical state with ketamine, and you were just about to recall your past experiences with ketamine, and I want to hear all about it, right? I was first introduced to it during my teenage years as a recreational drug, as a club enhancer, and sounds like you have some similar stories, so tell me about it.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, it's so funny because as soon as you say ketamine, I kind of like shudder. I'm just like, oh, I don't know about that.
You get that like ketamine chill.
Yeah, my past experiences with it, which I did the same thing with psilocybin when I first used it for my mental health or whatever. Thinking back, but yeah, ketamine, man. I don't even remember how we took it, but I remember those were the days when I was experimenting at the raves, and I was a candy kid, so I was lined with all the bracelets that would glow in the dark, and I was trying all the different drugs, experimenting with everything. But I remember it was so interesting because back then I would kind of it's so crazy to even think about. I would mix all the different types of drugs.
Into like one batch?
Oh yeah, there would be. I mean, I would go to raves and mix probably like. What would I? It was. There would be like a. I can't remember what it was called, but we would mix acid with. What is that? MDMA. It wasn't MDMA. It was ecstasy. Yeah, we would mix that, and then so it was just wild thinking about the things I did when I was a teenager. But what was wild was that when I was taking the mixture of all of those, I couldn't really tell where I was on the spectrum of like, is this the acid, is this the ecstasy, or is this I don't even know what else I would take. But when the ketamine came on, it shut everything else off. It was so wild. So yeah, I tried ketamine a few times, and the first time I tried it, I remember just being in what they call like a K-hole. What we called back then was a K-hole, and it just felt like this deep, dark pit of nothingness. There was nothing going on, but from what I remember, I was sitting in the back of the car and a couple of us had tried it. And like I said, I don't remember how we even administered it at all. I can't remember that, but I know it was pure ketamine. And yeah, I just remember kind of sinking into, I remember just sinking into the back seat, and it was almost as if I left my body, but I didn't, because I was still there. I was heavy. I mean, I felt so heavy. I can't remember what it was, but I knew that I couldn't lift anything. I couldn't move. I was just this heavy, dark hole. It was such a wild experience because it was just a bunch of nothingness. I don't even think thoughts existed at this time. And I just remember being scared because I was afraid that I was going to get trapped there. I mean, as with a lot of different mind-altering drugs, you get to a point where you think, am I stuck?
Am I always going to be here?
Yeah, is this how real life is now? So yeah, my experience with it was not always very positive, which, you know, I don't even know, the word positive is interesting for me because I feel like I can learn from any kind of experience. There's no such thing as positive or negative, right? There's always something to take from everything, but that one's definitely one I've been nervous about. We were talking about it because I have a couple friends that have been trying ketamine treatments for alcoholism and for depression and seeing really great results and telling me about their experiences, and it blew me away because I thought, I just went into this deep, dark K-hole, and I was afraid that I was never going to, I mean, I went deep down into the earth. It felt like I was just deep down in, and I was never going to crawl back out of it. So I have
for
no
you,
idea.
the K-hole was scary.
Yeah.
Did you experience it a number of times?
I experienced it. Yeah, I experienced it a second time because I thought, well, I mean, I didn't care. I was trying everything. So I thought I'd try it again, and same thing. It was just, I wouldn't say it was scary, but it wasn't something that I was gaining anything from, I guess. It was just like, blah.
Sure.
You know, it was just like, what's the point of this? I mean, I relaxed deeply, but I didn't get much of it.
Well, it's a disassociative anesthetic, right? So that's probably why you felt like not connected to your body completely. Yeah. Right? It's almost like it disconnects you for a little bit, so you can see yourself and see the world from this removed, objective place.
Okay, yeah.
But you still know, like, it's kind of tethered.
I'm real, I'm here, yeah.
But the anesthetic part comes in, right? And then it feels like you're almost paralyzed. Like, you could move if you really wanted to and you tried. Yeah. But when you're in that K-hole, oftentimes, when you're in that place of, like, totally gone, lost, like, not even in this world or this dimension anymore, then it doesn't feel like you can move.
Yeah, I felt like I was getting drawn back, but we were going nowhere.
Right.
It was just...
Right, but in reality, you're just sitting still. Like, nothing's actually happening to you. Well, I shouldn't say in reality, because you're in a reality too. That is, it's interesting too. Back when I was doing ketamine in high school and things like that, like, I was doing it mostly for the novelty, the recreation. But I was having, and I didn't know it at the time, but I was having really profound transformational experiences of different varieties, but just kind of like, that doesn't exist, right? I'm still in, like, my scientific mindset in my teenage years. So I'm, I can remember, those were my first instances of remembering astral projection. I was on high dose ketamine. And I remember doing it almost ceremoniously at some point. I liked it in the club, at the rave, so I brought some home with me. And
so you're at the club moving around on?
No, usually I'm like against the floor. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, I mean, like, so I enjoyed it in the dance environment with the music and everything. I brought some home one night, and there was nothing better to do, so I put some, trance music on. You did a little ketamine and laid in bed. And had an out-of-body experience. I had astral projection. I, had all these things that later, now I'm like, oh shit, that's what those were, and that's possible. But back then, it just seemed like a hallucination. Right. So I think there is, like, a lot of learning that can happen from ketamine, but just like any other psychedelic, you got to have the context for it. You got to have an understanding of the power that it has.
What it's going to do,
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, you find yourself in those spaces you've never been before, and how do you make sense of it? You don't.
Well, and so I've had somebody kind of somewhat connect it to a deep ayahuasca experience, which is just fascinating to me that it's this man-made thing that can, so I've been fascinated of how true that is, like how comparable it is to other psychedelics, or do you get visuals, do you get like how is it compared?
For me, well, not every experience is visual.
Okay.
And there's lots of different ways it can be done. You can have eyes open experience, and in those experiences, depending on what you're doing, it's different.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. Like, if I were to do some ketamine right now and go watch a movie or watch TV, it may feel like I am this 4-dimensional body looking at a 2-dimensional plane, but that the movie and the characters are talking actually like directly to me.
Okay, yeah.
I'll notice new nuances in the movie that I never even knew before.
Okay.
So it's quite interesting. It shows you like a different layering of your reality in front of you.
Yeah.
But almost has like this sheen over it. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And then if you close your eyes and have an internal experience, I've had experiences where there's no visuals, but I've definitely had experiences where it's enrapturing, 360 degrees, blasting at 1,000,000 miles an hour through the universe. I've had experiences on ketamine being able to see the birth of the cosmos and the breath that the cosmos breathes in and out as it expands and contracts. And its connection to our breathing and connection to living systems and all. So I've had intense visuals. I've had visuals of memory. I've had shadow work come up before, archetypes come up. Yeah. So maybe that's where some of the connection to ayahuasca is some of the archetypes that show up. So I've seen like dragons and snakes and things like that similar to ayahuasca.
Yeah, wow. Well, and then, like ayahuasca with shadow work and stuff and taking it out. But, on ayahuasca, I've seen the birth of the cosmos as well and met, I feel like I've met God before on ayahuasca. But, I think it's just fascinating to see the differences of, LSD, ketamine, what, I don't even know what the question would be, but, what the difference is. Because there's definitely been times where I've eaten mushrooms in the same space that I've taken ayahuasca, and so the spirit of ayahuasca's been there and felt that, and so my mushroom experience changed completely into an ayahuasca experience.
Really?
Yeah, I've had a lot of mushroom ayahuasca experiences where I've taken a very small dose of mushrooms and I'm on a full-blown DMT ayahuasca experience. So it's wild that they can cross over. But I'm interested in and I've heard that a lot of that is just the mycelium connects all the plants, so it's easy for fungus to draw from the vines of the ayahuasca. It's easy for all the mycelium to connect deep down into the earth, and so the plants can talk to each other. But it's fascinating to see these man-made mind-altering drugs and how they connect, because it sounds like a lot of what you just said is what I've experienced in ayahuasca. So I'm
and most of our chemical drugs these days are still in their base form derived from plants.
Okay.
Even LSD is derived from fungus off of wheat, ergot.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So ketamine was first developed from PCP.
Okay.
And they wanted to find like a version of it that had less psychotic stuff. So they got ketamine, and ketamine was super useful for. It's extremely safe. It's like one of the safest drugs out there. And in high school, I did not think that.
I know
was
that
true
is not my perception.
Of how powerful it is. But they first developed it for use with infants. To put them under for surgeries and things.
Oh, okay.
For soldiers on the battlefield, so you could give them ketamine, and the soldier could like almost or sometimes walk themselves off the battlefield. Whereas if you give them like an opiate or morphine, then you got to have 2 other guys carry them, and there's 3 men
it's
lost.
Functional.
Yeah, so versus 1. So use heavy through military, and then everyone knows the story about it being a horse tranquilizer.
Right.
It is
That's
used
what I knew about it. Yeah.
So it's used in veterinary medicine.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of it comes from these days. But it's also being used by EMTs. For people who are having psychotic breaks or some kind of negative drug reaction as like a chemical restraint mechanism or tool.
Well, and I did see that recent story about was it Elijah? I can't remember his name.
I don't remember his last name. But the paramedics in Aurora used ketamine as a chemical restraint, but used like twice as much. Yeah. Oh, the dose they gave him was like 500 mgs per kilogram or something, or 500 milligrams, some ridiculous amount. Wow. But way beyond therapeutic value. But it's
so the education
useful.
Is Huh.
And we're hoping, myself and Sarah Gale from the Zendo Project are hoping to help go into Denver and teach paramedics and police and hospital workers about how to better handle people who are on these medicines. Yeah. So that we don't need to use chemical or physical restraints as often. Bringing in this lens of compassion, rather than just like onto the next guy. Right. Right. So we need some specialization around that. But anyway, ketamine is super, super safe. Super valuable as far as for our society. I think World Health Organization deemed it a world's essential medicine. So it's kept in every single hospital. Yeah. But it's reported that the negative side effect are these dissociative states, right? That's listed as a negative side effect.
Quote,
right.
Quote unquote negative.
And that's only because people who elect to use ketamine for like surgery or something without knowing will come out of it having had this profound out of body experience and be like, I hated that, or I was scared, or I was not prepared for that, and have this bad trip, right?
Right.
I think
you need to be better prepared mentally.
Yeah. So I mean, its value in our society is there, but I personally view that K-hole or that dissociative state as the therapeutic piece of the medicine.
If you know,
right?
That's what it's doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I want to dig into that in my dissertation, because that mystical state experience is that breakthrough, breaking down the veil completely to where you feel oneness and that unity consciousness. And that's kind of how that mystical state has been defined across cultures. Oh, yeah. But no one knows how exactly
it's hard
people get there.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I reached that. I think in an ayahuasca experience, too, it was like, this sounds crazy, but it was like, I almost took my face off. Yeah. And just put it over here on the wall. And I was like, I'm not even Michelle anymore. I just am. And it was so wild to be able to strip yourself of your ego and your identity and just be so comfortable in that. But I imagine, I knew that going in. I knew that I could have these experiences, but I imagine going in without knowing the intent or without knowing that setting that can without having that guidance would probably freak me out.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wild, huh?
So I'm hoping that we can change maybe some of the medical literature to say there are some, novel and useful uses for this negative side effect, but we're working really hard in Denver right now to, on the psilocybin panel to do stuff around, to do stuff around, not only reporting, but we're looking into bringing hopefully some psilocybin research to Denver. Awesome. We're having talks about, what would it mean, or what would it look like to have Denver be like a sanctuary city for psilocybin therapists? Sort of like what's on the ballot right now for Oregon.
I know, I was going to say Oregon's doing that.
Yeah, so for people who don't know what that means, it would just be the lowest priority. So it'd still be illegal, but it would be law enforcement's lowest priority for practitioners, either for group or individual therapy sessions, using these medicines. So, I mean, I think they're trying to put in play too that Oregon would actually defend people if they got busted by the feds. Okay. Yeah, so they would have the support of the state to use these modalities. Right. So we're trying to bring that in. And we're having talks about what would safe use sites look like for people who want to use hallucinogens. So that you're rest assured that set and setting are good, and there's medical
they're not going to send these people out into the world. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking about all that stuff, education, public service announcements.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really fun and exciting gig. It's really an honor to be a part of that.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I've had a lot of talks with Kevin.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I know Kevin and his wife. So
Excellent.
yeah, being able to see where they've started and kind of grown into this big, huge movement, it's wild to see. But I guess I'm wondering too. I know that there's a lot of religious protections being able to be used with, like being able to use these medicines under what is it? Yeah, just religious protections, churches, so that people can use that. What does that look like with the legality of that when it comes to the feds?
Yeah, and that's a great question. You know, there's some Supreme Court rulings that ruled in favor of a couple identified religious traditions that can use it as a sacrament, so that's how they classify it.
Yeah.
So there's the Native American Church who's allowed to use peyote. There's the Santo Daimyo Church that is allowed to use ayahuasca. I think there might be a couple more. I don't think there are any. Well, actually, mushrooms might also be available to some indigenous
That's what I
groups here in the U.S. But it would be really cool to be able to, and I think it's important that we do if we're going to be, you know, as a panel, like hoping to inform people on policy changes in legislature. Like we need to be totally inclusive of indigenous practices.
Right.
You know. The people that live in Denver were not there originally, right?
Right.
We took this land from someone else.
Right.
And if those cultures used indigenous plants for their healing, which I know they did, we need to honor that too and have that written into law as well.
Right.
So that, yeah, if someone's practicing and it's part of a legitimate religious ceremony, they should not have to fear persecution for that.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
I know the people that I work with have started a church.
Really?
Yeah.
For ayahuasca?
Yeah. So I don't know what that all looks like. I know that we've got some lawyer friends that are all working on different things, but I know that, and that's the thing, is like that cultural appropriation thing, but if you have facilitators that have worked with different teachers, you know, I don't know what that looks like to create your own church. I'm not in a part of that, but I know that I've got different connections with different friends that are working on creating religious protection to make sure
That's
that
so awesome.
Yeah, it's so great. So that, because it is when I've worked with it in the past, there's some people that don't understand exactly what I'm doing, so I say I'm off to go to my church for the weekend. You know, I'm gonna go and have my religious experience for the weekend, because there's nothing else I can really say to explain what it is I'm doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's really good to know that Denver's working towards being a sanctuary state. Are you guys in the early stages still?
Yeah, we're still just throwing ideas around because I mean, as a panel, we're only tasked by. I mean, so this legislature passed, and as part of the legislation around decriminalization, it said that we have to, as a panel, we have to produce a report to the mayor and to city council, just letting them know what data we can collect and what information we have on statistical things that have happened since decriminalization. They just want to know.
Yeah.
Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? We need data. And so we're at a stage now where we've got all the players. We know, like we talked to everybody that we're going to collect data from. So now it's just a matter of collecting the data and doing the write-up. So within a year already, and we have actually we have to produce this within a year, but we're already almost there.
Ahead of schedule.
Yeah,
nice.
So we're already starting to think about, you know, how are we going to use this as a jumping off or as a springboard to the next thing. And so that's where we're starting to get creative, talking about, you know, we want to welcome research in and safe use sites and all these things. Like, how can we make the biggest impact possible in the time that we have?
Right.
And we report right to the mayor, so it's
that's wild.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool gig.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, and I think that this is exactly what is needed right now. I mean, what a wild time to see all this other dismantling of things, and then this uprising of this. What a great, I don't know.
And it's a trip to see it happen simultaneously, right?
Right.
Like our movement with plant medicines and psychedelics is picking up more and more steam as the world goes into further and further turmoil. Like more and more people are being open to, like, even if they weren't before, they're like, okay, maybe this is the huge radical change we need.
Yeah.
I'm going to support this
Yeah.
because it's not what it used to be. It's not going back to normal.
Right.
Right?
Well, and I think there's so much more research out, like, now that everybody's collecting data. Like, there's so much, it's so funny talking to my parents because, they're not into this stuff. And I'm such an open person that I openly talk about my work and what I do. And it's so fun to be able to show them different research articles or share the benefits instead of just trying to explain my experiences. But I know they've seen my evolution of when I first started using psychedelics and my evolution of shifting. And it's not just the psychedelics, it's the integration piece afterwards, right? But yeah, it's just so great to be able to see these people that, a lot of people in my family that were once so in these views of very conservative, that doesn't fit in my box, I'm not going to open my mind to it, and now seeing all these different shifts and changes, I think it's so profound, with medical marijuana coming up and people seeing the uses of that and not having this idea of it being this dangerous party drug or something like that, or gateway drug, or whatever silly...
It is a gateway drug to legalizing the rest of them,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So in that way, good job labeling it.
I know. There we go. We'll just shift the... Yeah, so that's exciting. But I didn't know that, going back to ketamine, so has that... What is my question about ketamine? Is that something that's completely legal? Any office can use that in these settings, or is it there are certain psychiatrists that have been trained to use ketamine? What does that even look like in the mental health world?
And I mean, I don't want to misrepresent another field that I'm not a specialist in, psychiatry. But to the best of my knowledge, and I hope I get corrected if I'm wrong, but correct me gently. As far as I know, any psychiatrist has the ability to prescribe ketamine.
Okay.
But it would be highly recommended that they are trained in psychedelic assisted therapies.
That's what I was wondering, yeah.
Because, I mean, it's not just you give them... I mean, there are ketamine centers, for sure. They're called ketamine therapy centers, where you go in. There's literally like a couple rows of hospital beds. People are sitting in them. They just hook you up to the IV. There's no sitter. There's no therapist. And you just get your 2-hour trip and you walk out the door.
Oh, wow.
And they call that ketamine therapy. And it works for some people. But what we're trying to bring more of is ketamine-assisted psychotherapy.
Yeah.
So what that looks like...
guide.
Yeah, is the psychiatrist is usually the guide, but can also work in conjunction with a mental health professional.
Yeah.
They'll administer the dosage and either sit with the person in the room and help them integrate afterwards, or that's done by a mental health professional. Now, there's different types of ketamine therapy, and this is the same with, or it's equatable to like high and like medium dose with any other psychedelic. So there's psycholytic psychotherapy, which is lower dose, where you're more cognizant, and it's more useful for like sitting on the couch talking with the therapist, like deep talk therapy. Filters
removed, and so you're able to just flow.
That's like what the MDMA therapy is.
Yeah.
It's like a psycholytic dose. So then there's that, and they have that with ketamine. And actually, in this virtual age, you can actually get a prescription for ketamine. I think that the patient can take it at home and then like Zoom with the psychiatrist or come into the office. I don't remember how they work it out, but it's just a little tablet. It'll dissolve in your mouth, and then boom, 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, you're in that space. So that's psycholytic, and then psychedelic dose is the higher dose, and that's really meant to get you into the K-hole. Like that's the goal of the treatment. Is to get in.
We got to break through.
Right. So that deep disassociative state shuts down what they call the why am I blanking on this? Default mode network. You heard that term before?
No.
So the default mode, if you think about like the way you behave, the way you act, your personality, this is your default mode.
Okay, yeah,
These
makes
are
sense.
Like your automatic patternings.
Yeah.
So usually we're running in that most of the time during the day, unless we're mindfulness practitioners. But the ketamine shuts off the default mode network, or turns down the volume on that. So then all your automatic patterns just kind of just go away.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite metaphors, the way it's described, and this has been described by other psychedelics too, is like when you're creating patterns in your personality, it's like you're at the top of a sledding hill and you pick one path and you go down and you just keep going down that same path, and it just goes really deep until that's the only path you can physically go down.
Right.
So that's your default mode network. That's that path.
Yeah.
So then when you take the ketamine, it's like a big snowstorm happens and it erases.
Fresh.
Yeah, it erases all the tracks.
Yeah.
And now you get to stand on top of the mountain in the experience and see all the outcomes of all the different possible pathways you could take, and now you get to choose. And if you're good in the experience, maybe more experienced at it, you can go down a number of different scenarios in your 2 hours.
Just get curious.
Yeah. And then you come back out of your experience, and it's a short-lived thing, only a couple hours as compared to 5 or 6 for psilocybin or 12 for LSD. So you come out and then you integrate in the moment, and you go back a week later and integrate more, and it's really powerful. It's really cool.
Yeah, I'm definitely intrigued.
So yeah, it's legal. It's an essential medicine. But I would caution people that if they're interested in it, make sure you do your homework. You don't go to just a ketamine therapy center.
Yeah.
It's the quick, easy way, but there's no support around it.
Right. I feel like integration is the way for long-term support.
Yeah,
it's like if you don't have integration or even setting intentions or...
And there's none of that.
If you don't have that, it's not going to stick, I imagine.
Yeah, it'll just be lost like a memory.
Yeah.
Like that's what I think a lot of our like recreational experiences were like when we were teenagers, right? Still high dose, still, transformational out of body stuff, but we never took the time to integrate it.
Right.
We never tried to figure out like, oh, what does that mean? It was just like, oh, let's go get fucked up on this one next
I'm gonna go see dinosaurs again. I'm not gonna make sense of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think the integration is more important than the medicine.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I think that with all this decriminalization, people are, I've witnessed so many people drawn to like, I want to work with psychedelics and I want to have these profound experiences, and it's just like the way I've talked to different people about my experiences or making recommendations. It's just like it's great to have these fun or deep experiences, but until you actually pull the pieces out from the experience and integrate them into your life, that's all it is this quick trip. And that's fun too, but it's if you're really looking for that transformation, you have to do the work afterwards. You can't just go on these rides.
So I want to ask you this question because I don't think it's brought up enough in this world of psychedelics, because there's so many different avenues. There's indigenous use, there's recreational use, there's clinical use, there's all these different things. There's experimentation. So I'm definitely for all those uses, as long as people, are informed and they know what they're doing. Yeah. They're in a safe place. They're not going to hurt anyone else. But not everyone is sort of on that same bandwagon, Right. So one thing that psychedelics has taught me is that we are all one. Inclusivity is a given. And it's something we can work on to manifest more. But it's there anyway.
Right.
We're all part of this. And so if that's one of the teachings that we receive in these experiences, why are we still so encamped in our own ideologies, right? I definitely know psychedelic therapists who are only about that, no recreational use. And then I have people who are entrenched in shamanic practice, only that, no recreational use. For me personally, I use it as a tool for deep work.
Right.
But I also, like you said, schedule time in my month for fun me time.
Yep.
And sometimes that also involves psychedelics.
Yeah.
So for me, I recognize that they're not just for one thing, and I can use them as needed. Sometimes I need just a fun all-night dance party in my living room. And MDMA helps me do that all night long.
Yeah.
And it releases so much from my body to just move like that.
Totally.
And it's so therapeutic. So, I don't know, what's your personal take on that? Like, do you think it's possible to strike up like a healthy balance between recreational use, which is still healing in
Yeah.
a lot of ways. You know, engaging in that fun part of our personality, and also like deep ceremonial, more
Work,
structured.
I mean, I'm the same way. I use it in all aspects too. You know, it's definitely, I become a really good friend with psilocybin, and so yeah, I have different uses for it. But I still think underneath all of that, even if you're gonna play, I think that you still have to be aware of your set and setting.
And have reverence.
Yeah, like I think you still have to have that. Like that has to be the basis. You know, if you're gonna go to a concert, you know, have everything set up before you go. You know, if you're gonna use it that way, just make sure that you know, watch your dose, watch everything that you're doing. But yeah, I don't think that there has to be one certain way that they're used. I think there's such a brilliance in different psychedelics that, you know, and I'm not going to go and microdose ayahuasca or go, you know, I don't know. Like there's different, I think that the more experienced you are with it, yeah, you can get a little bit looser with it. I've definitely had times where I used it recreational and it turned into this, experience that was, it turned into work. I was like, oh shit, I didn't know that this was going to come up tonight. But because I've worked with it so long, it didn't scare me. I was like, okay, I guess I gotta face this shadow. Great, you know, like, okay. But
have you ever done that in like a group of people who you're just recreationally, and then you go into the deep work in the middle of the room?
Something shows up.
Yeah, I had one of those experiences, and you know, you're right on the jumping off point, and it's like, do you want to jump or not? And you know, I had that thought cross my mind of like, oh no, I hope this is like appropriate for me to do here in front of all these people who are just here having fun on this thing. But right away I was hit with, oh my god, like all these people are shaman or psychedelic practitioners anyway. Yeah. I'm in the perfect place to let go right now. If anything happens, like these are the people I need to do it around. And I did, and it was one of the most profound experiences I had.
And I think that that's the thing, is you kind of have to let go of the expectation of what it is, what's going to happen with it. And as long as you can surrender and let go to it and just allow whatever is going to come up, because every time I've taken it, I've gotten everything that I need, even in the moment when I was just like, fuck this, like I want this to be done, shut it off. But I received everything that I needed in the moment, even if it didn't feel like it. But yeah, I think for me to use it recreationally feels so much cleaner in my body and in my mind than alcohol or something like that. It's just like I can go to a concert and I could feel the music and be in the music and see the colors of the music, but
and still feel good the next day.
And feel great the next day. Feel even more inspired to play music the next day. Like I'm so much more inspired. So I mean, I'm not going to recommend it to people because, you know, I don't know where they're at in their life, but because I feel like I've done some work. Because, you know, back in the day, I used to take psilocybin and go to raves, and I have no idea what was going to happen. I had no safety net around me, you know, and I think it's, if you're going to play, set some boundaries, set some safety nets, and then, you know.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, but that's just for me personally, but yeah, I don't think that you have to use it in any certain set or setting. Typically, I think there's benefits in all of it, and people need to get silly and let go here and there. Yeah, everybody's too serious.
Sometimes I need help to do that, and alcohol is not even on the menu for me anymore. So it's interesting. There's this meme floating around. I think I probably shared it a while ago, or at least I saved the picture. It says, "Oh no alcohol for me, just drugs." Just drugs, please.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. There's something different and something light about it. But yeah, it's interesting because I'm not an alcohol drinker, but every now and then I will. And during this COVID stuff, I noticed that I would have a little bit here and there, and instantly the next day, it's just like, oh, there's something lingering. It's just this dark passenger that's hanging out with you. Yeah, and so it's just so fun to just see the difference of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. You know, so I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with anything, like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely feel it every time with alcohol. You with feel alcohol, it in your body. Sure. But I feel like sometimes I've had some
of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with anything, like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely feel it every time with alcohol. You
With
feel
alcohol
it in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with anything, like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely feel it every time with alcohol. You
With
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with anything, like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely feel it every time with alcohol. You
With
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with anything, like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely feel it every time with alcohol. You
With
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with anything, like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely feel it every time with alcohol. You
With
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with anything, like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely feel it every time with alcohol. You
With
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with anything, like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely feel it every time with alcohol. You
With
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with anything, like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely feel it every time with alcohol. You
With
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with anything, like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely feel it every time with alcohol. You
With
feel
alcohol
it in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with anything, like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely feel it every time with alcohol. You
With
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with anything, like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely feel it every time with alcohol. You
With
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with anything, like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely feel it every time with alcohol. You
With
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with anything, like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely feel it every time with alcohol. You
With
feel
alcohol
it in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with anything, like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely feel it every time with alcohol. You
With
feel
alcohol
it in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with anything, like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely feel it every time with alcohol. You
With
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with anything, like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, you
With
feel it in
alcohol
your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it in
alcohol
your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it in
alcohol
your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it in
alcohol
your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day? Or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it in
alcohol,
your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel, so I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it
alcohol,
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel, so I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it
alcohol,
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel, so I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it
alcohol,
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel, so I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it
alcohol,
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel, so I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it in
alcohol,
your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel, so I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it in
alcohol,
your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel, so I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it
alcohol,
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel, so I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it
alcohol,
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel, so I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it
alcohol,
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel, so I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it in
alcohol,
your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel, so I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
With
feel it in
alcohol,
your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some.
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel, so I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep work with feel it alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel, you know. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel,
feel it.
you know. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel,
feel it.
you know. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel,
feel it.
you know. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it in
alcohol
your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel,
feel it.
you know. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel,
feel it.
you know. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it in
alcohol
your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel,
feel it.
you know. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel,
feel it.
you know. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it in
alcohol
your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel,
feel it.
you know. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it in
alcohol
your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel,
feel it.
you know. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it in
alcohol
your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel,
feel it.
you know. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it in
alcohol
your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel,
feel it.
you know. So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol with anything you've
Yeah.
like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it in
alcohol
your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel,
Feel it.
So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol with anything, you've like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel
alcohol
it in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel.
Feel it.
So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol with anything, you've like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel.
Feel it.
So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol with anything, you've like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel.
Feel it.
So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol with anything, you've like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel.
Feel it.
So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol with anything, you've like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel.
feel it.
So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol with anything, you've like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it
alcohol
in your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel.
feel it.
So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol with anything, you've like you've had like a lingering presence on you the next day, or I mean, I definitely you
with
feel it in
alcohol
your
for
body.
sure.
But I feel like sometimes I've had some
Of like, no, I'd like that clean energy, and then I can get up and still exercise or get up and still feel.
feel it.
So I like the recreational.
Have you ever felt like after doing deep alcohol?
Conversations with the Mind podcast is sponsored by mindops.com. You can find us at www.mind-ops.com. We're an eclectic counseling company providing mental health and mental performance services to individuals, small and large groups, teams, businesses, military, through face-to-face sessions or at a distance using phone or confidential video chat apps. We bring a unique Buddhist Western lens and specialize in general psychotherapy for all mental difficulties, sport and performance psychology for performance enhancement, addiction counseling for any maladaptive or destructive habits, and psychedelic integration therapy to make the most from your visionary medicine work. We are available as well for corporate workshops to address the needs of your employees' wellness.